Hello, my name is Virgil Wood, and I'm delighted to be a part of wonderful work that our next presenter and I have worked on for a long, long time. Dr. Owen Cardwell, he's a distinguished professor at University of Lynchburg, and he's a pastor in that city, his hometown, a city that gave my family and me hospitality while I pastored the Diamond Hill Baptist Church there. And I'm happy to say that he is now the hope of Virginia and America and what happens in Lynchburg. And Owen, we would just be delighted if you would share with our listeners, some of the things that have you engaged now at this point in your life.
I'm delighted to be part of this conversation, Dr. Wood. As you know, as we have had numerous discussions around Jubilee, it became apparent to me as I was able to step in the shoes that you left at Diamond Hill Baptist Church, and I'm now the new pastor there. It became apparent to me that Jesus, as he evolved in discussing his ministry, why he was here, when he was crucified and resurrected, he left a mandate for going to all nations and making disciples. And I had not thought about it previously, but while we tend to think of Jubilee in terms of economics and well-being, part of that process is an individual development, a discipling process, if you will. And so some of the work that I feel that I've been called to has to do with personal development, and how we help to intentionally create disciples, and in that process develop leaders. Because if you're going to have disciples, you need leaders to lead that moment. And as you are aware, my doctoral work was around the concept of creative and ethical leadership. So I was thinking about how over 51 years now for me in the ministry, part of my concern and part of what I constantly wrestled with was, how do you help people develop emotionally, spiritually, and all the facets of life that they need to do that. And now you've added to my thinking, how do you prepare people for Jubilee living? So Joseph Campbell, back in 1949, created this concept that he called the heroic journey. And what he did, he got hero stories from every era up to that point, every nation that he could. And he found out that as he looked at these hero narratives, that they had several commonalities. And so out of those commonalities, he created, at that time, 17 steps in the heroic journey. Hollywood has picked up on that, and pretty much every movie, hero-based movie that you see, carries these different stages, and Hollywood has pretty much boiled them down to 12 steps. And then I had the privilege of doing some work with Philip Zimbardo, who people primarily know as the researcher around the Stanford Prison Project, and I'll talk a bit more about that in our discussion. And then finally, I had an opportunity to do some work with Otto Scharmer around Theory U. And I'm an interdisciplinarian. And so those three kind of intersect in a working model that you helped me to label as HADA, which is an acronym for for Heroes and Dreams Academy, which was part of our work when I was pastoring in Richmond, but now has become more of a virtual work. That's kind of my take at my part in this discussion around Jubilee. And I'll pause there, and in case you want to interject or ask some questions, but
yeah, Owen, I'm intrigued by what you've been able to do with the school system in Lynchburg.
Yes.
And the fact that now they are deep into planning, both in regards to the challenges of COVID.
Right.
And we just talked a little bit about something that I'd like to call, this is just me thinking at this point, I'd like to call it summertime fun. If we could do something this summer around the country that leads into the fall, it could go something like this. It doesn't have to be this, but something like this, where we've been doing the ancestors, a journey,
Sure.
the Ancestors Hall of Fame, however we want to say. Let's think about something we could call summertime fun, happy while learning, all summer long.
Right.
Happy. Something. I'm trying to work into the happiness, contribution to this model that is emerging through our work.
Sure.
And we know that the New Testament word for Makarioi, where Jesus does the Beatitudes, Makarioi, it really is translated happy. So you could say, happy are the poor, for they shall, so forth. Happy is this, happy is that. So in a sense, happiness is a pretty important dimension to this. But in terms of the work that you've been doing in Lynchburg now, and of course as a native son of Lynchburg, and one who desegregated the school system back in the day there, you and Dr. Linda, there's an interesting coming around in my feeling as I see this, and I've known you all of those years, and you were a teenager, and I was leading the SCLC NACP work there in Lynchburg, Martin's Word. But it's what now God has prepared you to help Lynchburg do, so that they can create a learning system as an overall, so that every child can come into their greatness. And as I'm going on in Lynchburg, and you're so much a big part of that, that if you would just kind of lay out some of that, your leadership institute out of the university, and how that came about, and all of that, and how the churches are coming, you're bringing the churches and the whole community together around that general model.
Sure. Well, let me tag on to your concept about happy while learning as a summer initiative or investment. I think that's critical, because one of the things that's being reported all over the country is how COVID has exacerbated an already tenuous learning process, primarily for minority students. We've even put a label on it, calling it an achievement gap, which is a tremendous disservice to the learner, because it implies that there is something defective in the learner, rather than admitting that there's a defect in the system. Mm-hmm. But COVID has uncovered all of the cracks and the defects in the system. And so there's all kind of discussion about a lost school year and starting all over, keeping kids back. And there might be some reality to that, but in the process of all of it, the impact is not just academic. children are losing their joy.
Yes, yes.
I just read an article out of I think it was in ProRepublica about a small town in Texas, rather in New Mexico, Hobbs, New Mexico, 10 miles from the Texas border. And the story was about this star football player, a straight A student. Everybody in town loved him. It was a small town. And how, because they lost being able to play football, and while across the state line in Texas, the schools were still having games. And in fact, he went to one of the games, and then he and his father went to a game across in Texas. But the more he saw what he had lost, the worse it got for him. And one day, everybody woke up and he had committed suicide, and nobody had seen it coming. Nobody had seen it come. So our young people are in a very tenuous situation. And if we could over the summer begin to wrap around kind of social and emotional learning, we don't have to deal. When I say we, I mean our movement doesn't have to deal with the academics. We let the school system deal with that, but we can build around it the social and emotional learning that is critical. I think the idea of the ancestors that you have put together, the pairing of the ancestors and their stories, kids get hooked on stories about heroes, and what we can help them to identify is that they are not just the center of their story; they are the hero of their story. Mm-hmm. And part of my dissertation was a bit of an argument with Joseph Campbell, saying that he didn't quite go far enough. That not only is there a hero's journey, and he was talking about, those bigger than life personalities like Martin King and Nelson Mandela, and for kids, Superman and Batman, and those big H heroes. But Zimbardo comes along and does a 360 from his Stanford Prison Project and creates something called the Heroic Imagination Project, which helps young people in particular understand the small H, that you can be a small H everyday hero. And so I argued with Campbell that not only is there a hero's journey, but what we're seeing played out is, for some, a villain's journey. Now, I believe in redemption, so I don't believe that the story of the villain is complete until the life of the villain is over. So the villain has a chance for redemption, but if somebody is on a villainous path, they're still essentially following the same steps of a hero's journey. Mm-hmm. It's just that the outcomes are different. Mm-hmm. But the vast majority of people, particularly young people today, are operating from a victim's journey. Mm-hmm. They're dealing with the things that life throws at them, and they react to that in a victim's framework. So very quickly, the 12 steps, and I'm not going to go into all of them, have to do with the hero lives in an ordinary world, and all of a sudden he or she has this what's called a call to adventure. It doesn't have to be anything traumatic. It could be just a kind of an aha moment. Mm-hmm. They get this call to adventure, so they wrestle with it, and there is the opportunity and the potential for a refusal to accept the call, at least initially. Now, I don't believe that there is one hero's journey that we go on. I believe that repeats itself in our life over many cycles. So just because you refuse an initial calling does not mean that you won't accept a later one. And then somehow the hero meets a mentor that helps him or her to cross over the threshold into this adventure. They come up against tests and allies and enemies. And the enemies don't have to be physical. They can be spiritual and emotional enemies, that test them. They come to what Campbell calls the innermost cave, which is, a point of reflection. They go through this ordeal, this inner wrestling as to whether to continue the journey now, but they're already on this journey now. They're already in the midst of the adventure. Something is generally taken away from them that creates this kind of ordeal, that takes place. But then they overcome it. They grab this reward, which Campbell also calls the seizing of the sword, and a kind of a resurrection takes place. Then they enter on this road back to the place from which they were called, and they return with what Campbell calls an elixir. It might be a new understanding of life. It might be a new, process to deal with. It could be, but they return to community as the hero, as the returning hero and the emerging hero. So my postulation was that if young people in particular, and that's what I wrote this about, if young people in particular understood the steps and stages, now the truth of the matter is that they're living these steps anyhow. They just don't know what to call them. If they knew what to call the different steps and stages that they were going through, they could say, oh, I recognize that, and this is what I need to do next. So it's this making of disciples, if you will, or creating the hero initiative. So Zimbardo created this nonprofit process around research and education that promotes the idea of the everyday hero. And he deals with essentially four things: the bystander effect. How do you get people off the sidelines when things are going on? He talks about developing a growth mindset, the Dweck, concept of positive mindset, growth mindset. He deals with bias reduction, and he deals with what he calls Heroism 101, which is gaining a deeper understanding of how to develop your own heroic traits, and how do you understand the roles of the bystander and heroes and villains and victims. And then I came in contact with Otto Scharmer. Mm-hmm. At first, he was a book, Theory U, that I read as part of my doctoral process. But I had a chance to attend one of his presencing institutes and asked if I could have a few moments with him because I was a doctoral student. And he gave me 45 minutes, but those were 45 impactful minutes. And he kind of blessed, my thinking and the work that I was doing. And you and I talk about Scharmer all the time and about, the Theory U, and it's too complex for me to go into now. But as I was thinking about this conversation today and what we're attempting to launch, Scharmer also talks about, and you and I haven't talked about this much because I haven't really raised it, right. But he talks about one process and 5 movements. Now, this is still based on that U shape. So on the left-hand side of the U at the top is what he calls co-initiating. It has to do with building a common intent. And that's what we've been doing. We've been having all of these sessions, online sessions. We've been traveling from city to city. We've done some things at Virginia Tech and other places where we've been building this common intent around the beloved community, the beloved economy, Jubilee. So building intent requires stopping and listening to others and then examining what you're called to do and how you play a role in that. Because what we have to understand is Zimbardo and Campbell, I feel, present the heroic journey as an individualized process. And it is, but it has to be done in community.
Yes.
See, it has to be done in community. And so my heroic journey is only effective insofar as it intersects and coalesces with your journey as we discover together what God has called us collectively to do together, because that's the only way that any of this makes sense. And you know, and one of the things that this young generation now has to overcome is this thing that has been etched into the American psyche, this rugged individualism, you know, that you got to kind of go it on your own. And this has really manifested itself in this young generation today. But then Sharma goes on and talks about the next movement, still on the left side of the U, is called co-sensing. And he says, observe, 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 you know, pay attention. Go to the place of the greatest potential and listen with your mind and your heart. And so that's where he talks about having an open mind, an open heart, and an open will. Those have to be in play in order to do this co-sensing. And then we come to the bottom of that U, where the presencing, being present and sensing what's happening in the moment, connecting to your source of inspiration and will, and going to a place of meditation and allowing your inner knowing to emerge. And of course, in yours and my tradition, our source is God, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
So you know, going to that place, and then going up the right side of the U is this co-creating. It's the prototyping of the new living example to explore what the future is calling you to by doing it. And then finally, co-evolving, that we have an embodiment of the new in an ecosystem.
Yeah.
That probably resonates with Ralph, in an ecosystem that facilitates seeing and acting from the whole. So I laid out all of that to say, yes, we can operationalize that in a summer program. We're already, you know, in consultation and negotiation with Lynchburg City Schools to do a demonstration project in the Diamond Hill area. We have some partners that we've worked with over the years. Some are national partners, like the Why Try organization.
Yes.
We're looking to bring the work that Ron Ferguson does on the basics to bear. We're trying to identify now 25 families in the Diamond Hill community that have both preschoolers and older siblings in the family, so that we can create you know, a prototype of what this would look like, and hopefully after we gather the information that we need, then take it to scale. So that's kind of where we are right now. I see the wheels turning in your head, and so let's talk about where we go with this.
Well, yes, listen, I'm just mesmerized as I listen to you, and I don't want to embarrass you, but the brilliance is just astounding. And I'm thrilled that it has a practical landing place. And what you will do in Lynchburg, I want you to share with us. I understand that you will be publishing some of your major work shortly.
Hopefully.
Right, you will. It's begging to come out here now. Yeah. And I'm looking at some settings in which this has immediate a demand, so to speak. I think it's mandatory that clergy and teachers, even just parents, and I don't mean to say just parents. I mean, I don't care what you do that defines you outside of the home. I think that we have something here that we want to aim for fathers, for mothers, and for children, family as a whole. And one of the things that we've discussed on is how we get now the fraternities, Black fraternities, to take up the mantle and work with us in the next real legacy of Martin Luther King, the statue in Washington, we did that. That's okay. King said we shouldn't do it, but we had to do it, and I'm glad we did it. But now the real legacy of King is what you sketched out here. I suspect that people should look at the development of King as in terms of his hero's journey, or Mandela, or Malcolm, anybody else,
Yes.
or just your own grandmama or your granddaddy.
Yes.
This thing just helps us all. I'm looking, Owen, at what would happen if we took this 12-step process and made it community-wide or city-wide, sort of like the Alcoholics Anonymous
Right.
movement. We could call this Lovers Anonymous, call it whatever you want, you know. But what do you see there? And if you care to say a word about, you know, your book that will be coming, you know, once you're ready for it to come. And I want people to know that this is not just a fly-by-night thing here. This is something that you know you've been working at for a long time, even when you were pastoring in Boston. Work we did together,
Yeah.
And so maybe if people know that they're going to have access through these tapes, but there's going to be a more intense opportunity to go deeper into this during those 50 days between Easter Sunday, which is also King's death day this year,
Yeah.
and Pentecost weekend. And then on the other side of that, we will be ready to get into the summer work around, you know, happiness. Happy are they who. Churches can pick that up, schools can pick that up. We call it happy while learning.
Yes.
And I came up with that out of my Jubilee, out of my Soul Scope stuff. I won't go into that right now, but that's a paradigm around the Enneagram, and we have other partners who've done great work in that. People are going to have a chance to hear more of that, especially when Mike Alexander and Ryan Hulbert and their tapes. But for now, Owen, if you would just give us some idea as you conclude, however you want to conclude, at least give us some feel about, you know, we're looking for your book, man.
Well, the working title for the book is A Handbook for African American Male Development. And I focused on that because a lot of my work over the past 50 years has centered with what society considers the bottom of the rung. And so, you know, you look at the various statistical data, and we've done a lot of our work with African American boys that were caught up in the juvenile system. We've done a lot of our work with African American men in the criminal justice system. You and I, over the years, worked on, you know, reversing the jail trail.
Right.
That idea of there being 3 points of reference, you know, keeping kids off of the trail in the first place. So that required working with kids that were in particular academic trouble or behavioral trouble in the school system and were in danger of being either put out of school or dropping out of school. And, you know, so the result would have been them being on that jail trail. And then we did work with men and women in the prison with a fatherhood and motherhood curriculum that was not developed by us. It was developed by Dr. Jeffrey Johnson. And then we did a lot of work around reentry. You and I worked with the Progressive National Baptist Convention and Prison Fellowship on several reentry projects that we were doing. And so that's where a lot of my work has centered. At the former church that I retired from, we had a partnership with the local jail where we brought inmates into the worship service. They had to be eligible for work release in order to be part of that program. So a lot of my work has been done with African American males. And so we framed it around that. But the truth of the matter is that the book will be for anybody. The primary focus is on African American males, but white males, Hispanic males, even Asian males are running into difficulties, and it's starting to bleed over into the female demographics of each of those population groups also. So and a lot of what we're focusing it on also includes helping people to identify their strengths. And so I was actually introduced to the Gallup Strength Finder assessment while we were doing some stuff at Virginia Tech. And I understand that tech is moving away from that now, but I'm fully embracing it because it gives a common language that people can understand. If you can identify your strengths, see, the general thinking is that you work on your weaknesses, but the research shows that, if you manage your weaknesses and really focus on developing your strengths, that you grow more incrementally. So we're doing a lot of work around the Gallup Strength Finder, helping kids and parents to identify their strengths so that we can build around that. I happen to be a distinguished professor at the University of Lynchburg, and I head up the Center for Education and Leadership, which gives me another platform because the University of Lynchburg is developing a research hub. We have 130 faculty that have signed up to be part of an out-facing research hub. So the idea is that we want to do research that helps and impacts the community. And so we're working with several influence leaders in the city of Lynchburg to help both Lynchburg government and Lynchburg City Schools in the development of their strategic plans. Lynchburg has been historically called the city on seven hills. And so the seven hills kind of represent the historic neighborhoods. Most of those historic neighborhoods now are African-American neighborhoods. And so we want to identify potential leaders in those African-American neighborhoods and enroll them in our Leadership Institute that Dr. Roger Jones, who is our associate provost right now and my supervisor, we co-developed the Leadership Institute together. And so we're working on trying to identify leaders and emerging leaders within those communities so that we can enroll them in the Leadership Institute. We're working with churches to help them to be a part of this, because churches have people. Churches have people resources. They usually have facilities. They have monies that they don't know, but those monies can be redirected, and we can help them with what I call no-brainer evangelism. One of the things that Jesus did is he didn't go out preaching salvation to people. He went out and identified what people needed, and then he talked to them about their salvation. So, we want to identify that process. So it's kind of a multi-pronged, multifaceted approach, and I'm delighted. I feel like God has put me in the catbird seat right now. I just want to be faithful to do what I'm being tasked to do in the city of Lynchburg. And to seal the deal, God even made it so that my wife is now the human resources director for Lynchburg City Schools, because I never would have been able to go back and live in Lynchburg if there had not been a place for Sister Cardwell.
That's good. God has a great sense of humor, doesn't he?
Yes, indeed.
So to round this off, I want you just to share one other thing with us. You and I and Bishop Dixon of Houston have co-founded what we call the Jubilee National Collaborative.
Yes.
And these different people in the collaborative, we are moving towards consortium in different areas.
Right.
That's right. And but Owen, you and I have talked about the spiritual undergirdings of this. And we know that SCLC is barely breathing anymore.
Right.
OIC is barely breathing anymore. PNBC is breathing. But if we could conceive of our work as PNBC as a platform for Martin that was created to be a Martin's platform. 1961, I was one of the foot soldiers in Philadelphia, running the streets when we were trying to humanize another Baptist group that we grew out of. PNBC. Now, if we could think of a successor that combined SCLC's intent, OIC's intent, and PNBC now, and think about what this could mean in terms of this collaboration that we're talking about. We get the fraternities and the sororities, it links the service organizations, the pre-professional groups and the professional groups, all of those together around the Jubilee piece. But this Jubilee National Collaborative, and I'm just so thrilled on that as somebody who was a pastor in your city when I was 31, and you were 14 years old, and here we are going to jail in Danville, and I've just had an opportunity and a pleasure of seeing how you have let God use you at every phase of your life, and now you have a gift for the nation. And if the nation embraces what we're trying to get at in this collaborative, one person who's interested in our work on has begun to call himself the Jubilee Man. I like that. I like to think I'm a Jubilee man. I believe you're a Jubilee man.
Yes.
We have a Jubilee, a special somebody in our lives. I believe Ralph is a Jubilee man, but I sense that to say so that America can know that when we say Jubilee, we are saying Black first, but not Black only. That's what Martin is saying. We don't have to keep saying black and white and red and yellow and all that stuff. When we say Jubilee, we mean we as a Jubilee people. And right now, God is allowing us to set a table that everybody can be welcomed at. So Jubilee is that kind of table, but it's not going to stay that. It's Jubilee first. I mean, Black first. That means the Black church, for the most part, is inviting everybody to a table. It's not our table. It's not the Black table. It's everybody's table. But the invitation is coming first from the Black church, or I would say, Owen, the combination of what we're calling our Jubilee National Collaborative. At some point, we know that Dr. Marian Wright Edelman and her group will be there. And of course, you've had a history there also, Owen, that makes your story so rich. And I know people are going to be excited when they can get a hold of that book that's on the way. And I would also say that a word about a Martin Luther King PhD studies program that I had the privilege of helping to launch back in 2007, 2008. We've now mentored 39 PhDs in Martin Luther King studies. We have 50 some in the pipeline, and we're now ready to expand that. And we'll have a pipeline of professors for our own online servicing of different schools and universities across America. We claim the title to being a group, and Dr. Ralph Hall here has just been a sweetheart of a human being in helping to make this happen. What he's helped for me in terms of this connection with Virginia Tech and Virginia Union, but Virginia Tech deserves every accolade that I could suggest in embracing the work that I believe God has put me on earth to do. And it's to help us go from beloved community to beloved economy. We're on the threshold of that. Don't anybody tell us that it's not important, it's not possible to eliminate poverty in 7 years. We know it is. And as somebody else has said, it may be impossible, but we're going to do it anyway. and Brother Owen, you are a major part of why I boast on that. Somebody might think I'm arrogant. I try not to be arrogant, but I try not to surrender my assertiveness because God put it in me and I got to share it. And it's all right to be assertive as long as you're not aggressive or arrogant. And the
Yeah.
Holy Spirit monitors that line for me. But Owen, as you conclude your time with us here, would you say a word as you feeling about our Jubilee National Collaborative? You and Bishop James Dixon and myself, the three of us, God has birthed this collaboration idea in us, and it's also becoming a consortium and other things that people will hear about as time unfolds.
Yeah, I think that it's critically important, as I talked about Sharma's one process and five movements. I think it's critically important that we form these kind of collaborations like JNC. The recent work by Dr. Lewis Skip Gates on the Black church, while there's some controversy in the dialogue following that, and there were parts that I had some problems with also. But I think the positive thing that came out of that is a reminder of how important the Black church has been to our development. Because I think that we've lost some of that in these years, in these last few years, when we have surrendered to the prosperity gospel and all those kinds of things. Trying to I won't go down that rabbit hole. But the point is that as these other institutions, as you said, like the NAACP and SCLC are seemingly falling by the way, it's important that we not give up the heritage that we have inherited. We were birthed in the Black church. We were nurtured in the Black church. Much of what we have been able to accomplish politically, socially, spiritually, and financially came out of our allegiance and fostering in the Black church. And so since there's nothing else out there, there's no reason why JNC should not step into the void. Now, I want to stay away from arrogance also and not believe that we're the only solution, but we're a solution that I know because I know the people that are involved.
I am so grateful, Brother Owen, for our journey together, the friendship, the colleagueship. And I want people to know that these tapes will be available on our website. We'll soon be announcing Beloved Community website, and that information will be available within a week or 10 days from now. So that by April 4, we're racing towards launching this thing. Isaiah 61:3 talked about a planting of the Lord that he might be glorified. That's the Jubilee. It's a planting of the Lord that God might be glorified. When God is glorified, the people are beautified. That's where we're headed. And thank you all for listening.